No contact, the silent storm that breaks the avoidant. You don't chase someone who needs distance, you become the distance. When someone with an avoidant attachment style starts to pull away, to disappear behind vague texts, slow replies, or cold silences, the instinct for many of us is to try harder, explain more, love louder, prove you're worth staying for. But here's the truth. Chasing only deepens their retreat. Because for the avoidant, closeness often feels like a trap, not a connection. That's why no contact isn't just a strategy, it's a silent storm. It's not loud, but it's powerful. It doesn't beg for love, it commands self-respect. When you go quiet, truly quiet, not in a manipulative way, but in a self-respecting way, something unexpected happens. They feel it, the absence, the you they took for granted. And in that silence, without your reminders, your warmth, your messages, they're left with only their own emptiness. And that storm, it doesn't rage around them, it rages within them. And the ones who said they needed space, they begin to realize that space feels a lot like loss. But here's the most important part. You didn't go silent to win them back. You went silent to find yourself again, to stop fighting for someone who doesn't fight for you, because you're not a backup plan. You're not a placeholder. You are the prize. And silence is how you remind the world of that. When someone pulls away, our instinct is to close the gap, to call, to text, to explain ourselves one more time. We want to be understood, to be chosen, to feel like we matter. That need for reassurance is deeply human, but it often leads us into a trap. We start giving more while the other person gives less. We think our effort will fix the distance, but it doesn't. It widens it. This is where most people misunderstand the power of distance. They see it as surrender, as weakness, as losing the fight for love. But the truth is, intentional distance is strength in its most disciplined form. It's not walking away out of fear. It's stepping back out of clarity. It's realizing that your energy, your time, and your heart are precious, and that continuing to pour yourself into someone who cannot receive you fully is emotional bankruptcy. No contact isn't giving up, it's choosing not to beg. When you create space, you're not being passive, you're being powerful. You're saying, I refuse to participate in a dynamic that hurts me. And that act alone shifts everything. Suddenly, the person who once expected you to always be there begins to notice the change. But more importantly, you begin to notice the change within yourself. Your anxiety settles, your mind clears. You're no longer performing emotional CPR on a relationship that was gasping for air. Distance creates reflection for both people. For you, it's the moment to return to yourself, to stop revolving your world around someone who can't meet you halfway. For them, it becomes a mirror. It shows them what life looks like without your presence, without your constant validation, without your energy filling in all the empty spaces. That mirror is often more powerful than any words you could have said. And let's be honest, if someone is afraid of closeness, they'll only feel safer when they feel control. Chasing gives them that control. Silence takes it away. But this isn't about punishing them. This isn't a game. It's about refusing to carry the entire emotional weight of a connection by yourself. Most people equate silence with abandonment. But real silence, the kind that's grounded in self-worth, is a boundary, not a threat. It doesn't scream, it doesn't chase, it simply exists with confidence. And in that stillness, you begin to feel something unexpected. Power. Not the kind that dominates, but the kind that restores. The kind that says, I don't need to explain why I'm worth loving, My absence will say it for me. That's the paradox of no contact. The person who seems to be doing nothing is actually doing the hardest thing, choosing themselves over the hope that someone else will finally show up. It's not easy. It takes courage. But in the quiet, in the stillness, something profound happens. You stop waiting for permission to be valued. You start giving that to yourself. And that's when everything begins to change. Avoidant individuals often crave connection, just like anyone else. But the moment it feels too close, too intense, or too emotionally demanding, they instinctively pull away. They fear being overwhelmed, losing their autonomy, or being seen too deeply. So when someone starts getting close, they create space. Not because they don't care, but because closeness feels like a risk they're not ready to take. It's their defense mechanism, and it's often deeply rooted in early emotional experiences that taught them that vulnerability is unsafe. When this happens, many people respond by doing the exact opposite of what works. They close the gap. They lean in harder. They try to reassure, reason, or even plead. They send one more message hoping it will finally get through. Say one more thing hoping it will be heard differently. But this creates the very thing the avoidant fears: pressure. And pressure triggers their need for more space. This is where the dynamic becomes painful and frustrating. The more you pursue, the more they withdraw. The more you try to connect, the more disconnected they become. It's like trying to hug someone who's constantly stepping back. You keep moving forward until you're off balance, chasing a connection that always feels one step away. And the more you do this, the more you send a subtle message to yourself. Their needs matter more than mine. Quality. But when you stop texting, stop checking in, stop trying to be understood, when you let silence enter the space, real silence, not strategic manipulation, something begins to shift. Suddenly, you're no longer giving them the reassurance they've come to expect. You're no longer playing your role in the push-pull dynamic. And the avoidant is left with a new kind of space. This is powerful. Because unlike the space they create for themselves, which they control, your silence is something they can't manage. It interrupts their pattern. It introduces uncertainty. Not because you're playing games, but because you've stepped out of the emotional cycle. And in that uncertainty, they are forced to sit with their own discomfort, their own doubts, their own fear of loss. For once, they are not being pursued. And ironically, that absence begins to draw them in. Avoidants feel safest when they have emotional space. But emotional space doesn't always mean disconnection. It means freedom to choose, to reflect, to feel. And nothing provides that better than no contact. It's not a punishment. It's the only language the avoidant truly hears. Not because they don't care, but because they're wired to respond, not to intensity, but to impact. Your silence becomes that impact. And again, this isn't about manipulating someone into caring. It's about breaking the unspoken contract that says you must always be the one reaching. You stop fueling the imbalance. You stop proving your worth. And when the avoidant finds themselves alone with the quiet, without your energy filling the space, they finally face the truth they've been avoiding. Distance doesn't feel like freedom anymore. It feels like something's missing, something real, something they never thought would walk away. When you're constantly available, always texting first, checking in, showing up even when your needs aren't met, you unintentionally become part of the background. Your presence, no matter how loving or loyal, starts to feel guaranteed. And in relationships, what feels guaranteed can quickly become undervalued. That's not because you're not worthy, but because consistency, when met with indifference, loses its emotional weight. When someone knows you're always there, they stop asking what it would feel like if you weren't. This is where the power of contrast comes in. Absence creates contrast. It shifts the emotional atmosphere in a way that words simply can't. When you step back, when your messages stop, when your emotional energy is no longer available on demand, something powerful begins to happen. The avoidant or the emotionally distant person starts to feel the gap. Not immediately, sometimes not even consciously, but over time, they begin to sense something different in the air. The quiet hum of your absence. Before, your love was a constant. It filled the emotional space between you. It cushioned the discomfort. It allowed them to feel the comfort of connection without the responsibility of reciprocating it fully. But once that energy is gone, they begin to notice what it held together. The small messages they never answered, the warmth they ignored, the affection they minimized. It all starts to stand out more in the vacuum you've left behind. This contrast is what makes silence so effective, not as a tactic, but as a truth teller. It reveals what was really happening in the relationship. If they truly didn't care, your absence won't matter. But if they did, if they were just afraid, unsure, or emotionally unavailable, your silence will highlight their loss more clearly than any speech, text, or conversation ever could. It's easy to underestimate your value when you're constantly trying to prove it. But when you stop speaking, when you stop reaching, when you stop filling in all the emotional blanks, they finally get to feel what life is like without your energy. That contrast isn't always comfortable for them. In fact, it's often the very thing they were trying to avoid. Because now they don't just miss you, they feel the emotional weight of everything they didn't say, everything they didn't give, and everything they took for granted. And even more importantly, you begin to feel that contrast too. You begin to see how much of yourself you were giving to someone who wasn't meeting you where you stood. You realize how quiet your own voice had become in the effort to be heard. And in the silence, you start to hear yourself again. No contact doesn't work because it tricks someone into missing you. It works because it removes the noise. It clears the space. It gives both of you the chance to finally feel what was really going on. And when someone finally feels your absence, not just notices it, but feels it, they're faced with the truth that presence alone never revealed that you mattered, that you were never background noise. You were the melody they didn't know they were losing. There's a big misconception about no contact, that it's a strategy to win someone back, that it's about withholding attention to create anxiety in the other person, hoping that your silence forces them to miss you and come chasing. But that mindset turns no contact into manipulation, and manipulation is rooted in fear, not strength. Real no contact isn't about power plays or reverse psychology. It's about peace. It's about stepping away because staying connected was hurting you more than helping you. When someone keeps you in a state of emotional confusion, pulling you in, then pushing you away, your nervous system suffers. You become hyper aware of every message, every shift in tone, every moment of silence. You start overthinking everything you say, trying to make sure you don't scare them off. That's not love. That's survival. And eventually, your sense of self begins to erode under the weight of all that uncertainty. This is why going no contact is an act of emotional healing, not emotional warfare. You're not doing it to change them, you're doing it to return to yourself. Because in constantly trying to prove your worth to someone who isn't showing up for you, you forget that your value doesn't need validation. You don't need someone's approval to matter. You don't need their response to be whole. But when you're in the middle of that emotional chaos, it can feel like you do. So the silence isn't for them, it's for you. It gives you room to breathe. It gives you space to stop fighting for someone who isn't fighting for you. It clears the mental clutter, the overthinking, the emotional roller coaster. And it helps you reestablish the boundary between what you can control and what you can't. You can't make someone love you. You can't force them to see your value, but you can choose not to stay in a dynamic that makes you feel small, anxious, or unworthy. This type of silence isn't cold, it isn't bitter, it's calm. It's clear. It says, I care, but I care about myself too. It honors your heart by removing it from a place where it's being mishandled, and in doing so, it sets the tone for every relationship you have going forward, because you're teaching yourself something vital, that peace matters more than potential. If the person comes back, it should never be because your silence manipulated them into it. No, these are big messes. The person comes back, it should never be because your silence manipulated them into it. It should be because they realized your value on their own, without pressure, without chasing, without emotional bait. And if they don't come back, that's okay too. Because the point was never about getting them back. It was about getting you back. So when you choose no contact, you're not shutting the door in anger, you're opening the door to clarity. You're not giving up on love, you're giving up on begging for it. And that subtle shift in intention changes everything. It turns silence from a weapon into a sanctuary. Not a game of who cares less, but a declaration of how deeply you've decided to care for yourself. There's something deeply powerful about choosing to step back, not because you've lost hope, but because you've found yourself. When a connection feels one-sided, when your needs are consistently ignored, or when you feel like you're constantly waiting to be chosen, something inside you starts to dim. You begin to wonder if you're asking for too much, if your expectations are too high, or if maybe, just maybe, love is supposed to feel like this: uncertain, heavy, and but it's not. That confusion is a signal, and silence becomes the way you finally listen to it. When you go no contact, it might seem like you're doing nothing, but internally, you're doing the most important work, reclaiming the parts of yourself you gave away too easily. You stop performing for someone's affection and start being honest about what you truly need. You begin to see where you abandoned your own standards just to keep someone who was never meeting them in the first place. And in that process, something beautiful happens. You start to recognize your worth again. Most of us don't realize how much of our identity gets tied to someone else's attention. When they're warm, we feel secure. When they're distant, we feel rejected. It's a constant emotional high and low, and we lose ourselves in that cycle. But silence breaks the pattern. It allows you to detach, not just physically, but emotionally. You begin to see them more clearly, not as the person you hoped they would be, but as they actually are. And even more importantly, you begin to see yourself more clearly. You start asking different questions. Do they miss me? Becomes, why was I tolerating so little? Will they come back? Becomes, was I ever truly seen? And as those questions evolve, so does your sense of self. You remember your voice. You remember your standards. You remember what it feels like to wake up and not check your phone for validation. That silence creates room for your identity to grow again. Not around another person, but from within. This isn't about becoming cold or heartless. You can still love someone deeply and choose not to engage. That choice isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's recognizing that love isn't proven by how much pain you can endure for someone. It's proven by how much peace you're willing to protect within yourself. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for both of you is to walk away when staying means losing who you are. No contact is a boundary, a reset, a chance to stand in your own energy without trying to mold yourself to someone else's emotional limits. And in that space, you grow, you get stronger, you stop waiting to be chosen because you've already chosen you. That's when your silence becomes something more than distance. It becomes dignity. Not silence to punish, but silence to rebuild. And when your identity is rooted in self-respect instead of someone else's attention, that's when you truly begin to heal. And so if you find yourself in the midst of silence right now, if you've chosen no contact or you're considering it, know this: you are not weak for walking away. You are not heartless for protecting your peace. You are not giving up on love. You are choosing a higher love, one that starts with you. Because when someone avoids connection, the loudest thing you can say is nothing at all. Not in anger, not in resentment, but in clarity. No contact isn't the absence of love, it's the presence of self-worth. Let your silence speak the words you no longer need to explain. I'm not here to be tolerated. I'm not here to prove myself. I'm here to be met fully. And if I'm not, I will lovingly let go. You are not just walking away from someone. You are walking back to your strength, to your dignity, to your truth. Let the storm be silent. Let the storm be you. Thank you for listening, for feeling, and for choosing growth over comfort. Whether you're just beginning your healing or deep in the journey, never forget this: you were never too much. You were just offering more than someone was ready to receive. And that's not your failure. That's your power. Until next time, take care of your heart, honor your worth, and walk in your peace. Thank you, and goodbye.